Let's talk about Afghanistan. Now, you may have seen this week was a horrible anniversary. I don't know what the term, I always bring this up because it's not, anniversaries to me are joyous, right? But here we are, the 1 year anniversary of the withdrawal of Afghanistan. And boy, did we left that country better than we found it, didn't we? Did the Biden administration mislead the American public about the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan? That's the big question today. That's what House Republicans are accusing the Biden administration of doing in a new report. Look at this. I mean, this is what we left, August 2021. So the House Foreign Affairs Committee is looking right now to how the United States, what they told us publicly. What did the Biden administration tell us publicly from the podium? What did President Biden tell us was happening? The U.S. began withdrawing in August of 2021. The withdrawal was called for by President Trump, you'll recall, right? While he was still in office, and then it was executed under President Biden. So it was carried out by the agreement signed by President Trump and then executed by Team Biden. The report was released this week, and it claims that there were more Americans left behind in Afghanistan than the White House had estimated initially. Now, the White House said that there were only 100 to 200 people left behind in August of 2021. But at least 800 Americans had been evacuated by the State Department since then. So how does that math work exactly? So the Biden administration tells us there's only 100 people left, but since then, the State Department has pulled out over 800 Americans from there. Seems off.
But if they were there, okay, so did they live there? Why were they left? And why was it a bad thing that they were left if we were withdrawing? I don't understand why that's important, personally.
Well, it's a good question. First of all, as a United States citizen, right, one of the things that as a United States citizen you pay tax dollars for, above all else, is that the United States State Department will come and get you out of anywhere. That's literally the contract you have. That's one of the things that your passport provides, right? And this is one of the arguments people say against renunciation of your American passport. Well, the United States government, no matter where you are around the world, if you're in a war zone or if there's something, a government collapses and there's a problem, the United States government won't forget you. We'll come get you, right? Great. So is that a reason to keep your American passport? When you're being taxed to the hilt and you're paying and all of your tax dollars are going to funding foreign wars, that's the reason? Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I don't know exactly who all of these people were. The State Department was aware of them because when you're traveling and your passport's registered, they know where you're going. Or maybe these people registered on the State Department's website ahead of their travel, right? So they went to this. That's what they actually ask you to do. If you're traveling overseas, the State Department actually would love it if you go to their website and you type in that you're going there so they know that you're overseas. They can track you. They want to know that. The report says from the State Department also raises the alarm about thousands of former Afghan military personnel. So this is the more troubling piece to me. And we'll kind of get into those 800 Americans, but the thousands of former Afghani military personnel that had sensitive information about U.S. trainings and weapons and all of that. Everything that we had been working with them for 20 years, right? Many of them have since fled either to Iran or other places after the Taliban came in. And the report says that these people are at risk to information security. Now, here's the top Republican of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. This is Representative Michael McCall, who said that this report shows that there were many sins in this entire process. Listen.
There are many sins, if you will. There was a complete lack and a failure to plan. There was no plan, and there was no plan executed. And to your point, even beforehand, I think the State Department probably didn't have the resources it needed to carry out an evacuation of this size and enormity. They had 36 consular officers at HKIA trying to process hundreds of thousands of people. They were overwhelmed, but there are so many mistakes. The biggest one, Margaret, for me, having lived through it, we're, being in the classified space, listening to the intelligence community tell the story about this is going to be imminent. It's going to fall sooner rather than later. The military told us the same thing. And then we went to state, and they paint in the White House a very rosy picture. There's a disconnect between intelligence on the ground and what the White House is doing. I think in this report, this says it all. Like, there's no way we're going to evacuate embassy personnel from helicopters like we did in Vietnam. Yeah. And of course, we know that happened.
And what might be the biggest heartbreak about all of this is the failure to evacuate Afghan allies who should be entitled by law to live in the United States. This is the thing that really pisses me off. We've talked about this on the show a couple of times. I know it really bothers Natalie as well. According to Foreign Policy magazine, approximately 77,200 Afghans who applied for SIV acceptance are still stuck in Afghanistan today with their families, living in dangerous conditions under the Taliban rule. We fucked up their country for 20 years. And those who were able to make it to the United States, even when they get to the United States, if they're lucky, somehow, they're still living in uncertain circumstances. The House introduced a bill to give them a path to residency in the United States. Those refugees numbered in the tens of thousands. Now, it's not a competition, but the United States has already hit President Biden's goal of admitting 100,000 Ukrainians as migrants into the United States. So these 77,000 families in Afghanistan are just waiting. But they fell right behind the line to any Ukrainians that wanted to get in the United States overnight. Like, come on in. And by the way, at the border, like for instance in Tijuana and other border places, where you go to look at if you are a Ukrainian, you get access to the best quality border transfer in the world. So when you walk in and you're dealing with trying to get a visa to get in the United States, there's toys for the children to play with. There's food. And the reports out of Mexico that if you're coming from anywhere else and you're trying to get a visa, going through that process, it's just like a rat-infested, horrible conditions, nothing for the kids, like no food. Sometimes you're there for like 10 hours at a time and then told to come back. But if you're Ukrainian, well, lovely conditions. And you get right to the top of the line, right in. 77,000, though, Afghan families, after we destroyed their country for 20 years, they can't get in, and they have to go to the back of the line behind Ukrainian families.
Well, I'd like to point out a lot of those 77,000 people that have been left behind that can't get out. These were people that were working with the U.S. military. These were interpreters. These were people that actually were actively putting a target on their back to ensure the safety of our soldiers. When we pulled out, we're just like, see ya.
Yeah. Thanks for your help. Bye-bye. We don't need you. I'm reading a novel right now by Jack Carr. Have you ever read any Jack Carr novels? Anybody in our chat read a Jack Carr novel? The first one I read was The Terminal List. I just read it a few weeks ago. I couldn't put it down. Chris Pratt plays him in a new Amazon show apparently also. I haven't watched that yet, but apparently it's fantastic. The second book, I'm on the second book now, and boy, they really paint a picture about like how we use these people. Like we just use them, and then we're done with them, we destroy them. The same thing that happened just with in Afghanistan just a few weeks ago, right? With Zawahiri, right? We were using Zawahiri for many, many years to work with, to basically launch attacks against, in Syria, and we were able to use him. And then when he used up his usefulness, we drone attack him. Right, like that's what we do.
Well, and that's our MO. Like we did that when we first were establishing the United States. We used American Indians to track other Indians, to move them to reservations, and they became soldiers. They got uniforms. They got a salary, and then when all of them were in the reservations, we put them in the buggies to move them to the reservations too. Took their uniforms, took their pay. And didn't we used you and now we're done with you. Like that's how this whole country was established. So I don't see why we would do anything different anywhere else.
No, and again, and I say this is not a competition, right? Like Ukrainians versus Afghans, like who's, but let's just look at the timeline here, right? So the conflict started in February of 2022 in Ukraine, right? Where the special military operation, Russia calls it, others want, you can call it an invasion, call it a war, whatever you want to call it. That's when it started in February, right? Where we were then suddenly fielding all of these Ukrainian refugees. And the United States put up its hand and said, bring 100,000 over here. Canada said, bring them here too. The UK was like, come on over here. So why do they skip the line when the conflict in Afghanistan is 20 years old? And the refugee crisis started in earnest in August of 2021, so well over a year ago. 6 months before. Again, another example of how brown people get pushed to the back of the line. It's just what happens.
It's easier to integrate people that look like us. You know what I mean? It's just easier.
And by the way, that's what, right. What was the senator or the member of Congress that said, or no, who was it? Was it a member of Congress or was it a British member of Parliament? Congress. I forget who said, well, let's just be, they look like us. So,
right.
So it's easier to, it's unbelievable. The committee, the Republican committee says that it has requested more information from the Biden administration, but they have not complied and they've been dragging their feet. They say that they will subpoena if necessary. And if Republicans win the majority in November, which, come on, that's going to happen, then they intend to launch and I'm not advocating one way or the other. I think both parties are absolutely corrupt. But we see where things are going. They intend to launch a full congressional investigation, which is pretty toothless because these congressional investigations, what do? They don't lead to anything other than we get information, which is one thing. It's going to show how much America commits. What's that?
I always ask when they start these commissions, I'm always like, okay, what are they trying to deter us from?
Right. Yeah. So again, and at least it'll give us some insights into how much America commits to the places that it invades. We use them and abuse them, and then we're out of there. We'll steal your oil, we'll steal your minerals and resources, we'll steal your gold, we'll steal your lithium, we'll steal your uranium, your silver, your copper.
Hell, we'll even steal your heroin.
Yeah, and we'll leave. This is a look at Kabul 1 year later. This is a news report I want to play for you. This is 1 year later and what Kabul looks like today. And let me just set this up before I play it. The situation in Afghanistan today. Okay, the economy has partially collapsed. Western powers sanctioned the Taliban regime, seizing the nation's currency reserves. We stole all of their money, and cutting off any aid packages to the people. So that's been cut off. These accounted for nearly 80% of the government's budget in the country of Afghanistan. So that's all gone. The UN Development Program estimated earlier this year that acute food insecurity now affects nearly half of Afghanistan's 40 million people. So we literally created a famine, okay? Food insecurity and starvation. That's literally what we've created. And the political and social situation is just as dire. Since taking power, the Taliban leaders have set about remaking Afghanistan society, according to Spiked Online, to their brutal interpretation of Islamic law. They have been going out extrajudicial justice to former government and military officials. They have been punishing those who fail or who fall foul of harsh laws. They have public floggings, amputations, executions. The list is endless. They have gotten rid of tons of freedoms for females, right? Teenage girls, for instance, have been barred from going to school. And in May, the Taliban chief and Afghanistan's supreme leader ordered women to completely cover themselves in public, including their faces. Those are just some of the niceties that now Afghanistan is facing. Here is a Sky News piece on Kabul 1 year later. Listen to this.
As we make our way through the centre of Kabul, there is stark evidence of the deep economic crisis here. Those considered middle class now struggle to make ends meet. In this upmarket district of the capital, women wait for bread to be handed out. They're desperate. On the side of the road, people are selling their belongings.
People are bringing their household goods for sale. Everything, you got a Hoover here and an old microwave. We have car boot sales in the UK, obviously, but this is different. These people are actually bringing their entire houses are for sale. I was talking to one guy who was saying that it breaks his heart because he's actually literally cleared out the lounge for sale here, but that's because the economy is in virtual freefall. They don't have any jobs, so this is the only way they can get any money.
Selling everything in your living room. Or, as we've seen, having to sell one of your children off. That's been happening, right? One of your daughters. So this is Afghanistan today, 20 years later. The lies, the mendacity of these leaders.
Thanks, America.
Thanks, America. Thanks, UK. Thanks, NATO. I hope you'll do the same. I hope you'll leave Ukraine better than you found it.
I mean, we are a global force for good, after all, you know?
We'll shove a boot up your ass, right? That's what we do. We'll shove a American Army boot up your ass.